All right. A very good morning to all of you. Um, um, Welcome to Vision Financial in our office. And I think all of you are in very good hands because Partha is one of our top advisors in the organization. So you see his face plastered in most of the boards around the office. He's been the long-standing. He's one of our more than 10 years roundtable member as well. So he's a long-standing person within the organization. So I just wanted to understand a little bit more about y'all. So that is this is, I've got, usually what I do is I've got lots of slides, but I'll just pass through some slides depending on the audience. So I'd like to know more about y'all first before I begin today's session on estate planning and wills and trusts and so on and so forth. So maybe each one of you introduce yourselves in a form so that at least I know where you're coming from and what are the concerns that you have in terms of family and estate planning. Maybe yourself. Miss Pastor. Yeah, sure.
Hi, I'm Kavita. I work on and off as a contractual basis, and I am with Girish. Mostly we have been with Partha for I think more than 5 to 6 years now, and mostly we'll be looking forward for the estate planning as well
Sure.
as the tariffs, which is the hot topic.
Sure,
now.
sure. Apart from gold, right?
Yeah.
Gold is always hard.
Right, I mean, we've been, as she mentioned, right, so been associated with Partha for some time. He definitely provides us a lot of insights. I think what I would be looking at is, I know that in Singapore, the nominations schemes are not maybe as good as what we have in India. So we need to understand what's the kind of will, whether it's your CPF money or your insurance or whatever, right? How, if any bulk amount comes into someone, how that needs to be, how the trust plays a role, what's the difference in will and trust, and what's maybe the better way for us to go ahead.
Sure.
Apart from the tariff, it's a big topic, everybody knows. If this is an opportunity or it's going to change the world, we don't know yet.
Of course,
So
of
let's
course.
see.
Yes, yes. Thank you.
Thank you. Mahesh, I've been associated with Partha for like 42 years because he happens to be my brother.
Fortunately or unfortunately?
Well, I'm not going to answer that question. That is a answer. So on the topic of estate planning, coincidentally I happen to sign up for this without knowing the topic because, as I said, he's my brother, but I'm quite glad that I'm here because it's a topic that my wife talks to me quite a lot about. And honestly, I must admit, for someone in the financial markets, as much as I pay attention to the tariffs and investments, I haven't paid enough attention to this
Sure.
aspect at all. Every time I Google, I get very simplistic answers that, especially in Singapore, is not a big deal and so on. Whereas my wife is a lot more particular about this. So I'll probably walk out with some takeaways for today.
Sure, sure. Thank you.
Good morning, my name is Sridhar. I'm with my wife here.
Yeah.
So, estate planning, we have some idea, not that much, but definitely you don't have any idea about trust and all that. So, really interested to find out what you have to say about trust.
Sure.
And tariffs, of course, everybody wants to know about that right now.
Sure.
I am Suchi. I think this is something about estate planning and trust are interesting for me. We both are working, we've got kids, and we just get carried away by work very often.
Yeah.
We think tomorrow will come. So we just want to make sure that things are settled. And in this world of globalization as well, where kids may or may not be in Singapore, it's good to know how these trusts could be administered if people
Sure.
live overseas versus citizenship.
Sure, sure. Thank you. Thank you. Selves? Anyone else? The lady here?
Hi, this is Swati. We're family friends of
Sure.
Partha, and we've been getting his advices on financial planning for the past 6-7 years. So always looking forward to such sharing sessions.
Sure. Good. Thank you. All right. I've got a good sense of the space in terms of estate planning. So let me just quickly run through with you. So before I go into estate planning, I think it's important for us to actually understand the nuances of estate or financial planning. All right. So when you look at wealth preservation, you always, as you build your wealth, you always want to preserve it, and you also want to make sure that you have enough money for retirement and if something untoward happens, you have peace of mind that the family is well taken care of. Right? So this happens to be the foundation of financial planning. And then of course you look at trust and wills and business insurance if you basically have a business, and how to plan for the risk involved in business. And of course the next is basically legacy planning in terms of how you can actually feed the financial aspects of your estate with a legacy. So when you look at peace of mind, you have your basic liabilities that you need to take care of, health in terms of critical illness and life and peace of mind. So basically these are things that basically been already covered through by Partha in terms of your whole financial planning process. And if it's not, then you want to make sure that the gaps are covered, because a lot of times we think that we have enough, but we may not necessarily have enough, because the liabilities can grow because of a purchase of a property or because of a loan that you took out for an education for your kid or something or another. So you want to make sure that the gaps are taken care of well. So in terms of wealth preservation, this is something that the whole idea of doing wills is to basically preserve your wealth. You don't want it to be lost. All right. So I'm going to cover with you a little bit of that in a while's time. But before that, I also want to, I think this is something that's even more important when you think about doing your wills and trusts, especially if you got assets all over the world. In your working life, it's like a water tank. You know, money goes into your tank and you spend your money. All right. So no problems. You know that you have water coming into your tank on a daily basis, and you never worry about it, because then you shower and you use your water, no problem at all. But the day will come when you retire and this stream will stop. The question here is how much water you have in your tank that will take care of you for the next 20, 30 years. The unfortunate truth is you start working when you're 20 plus till 55, 65. The unfortunate truth is we are going to live another 30 years from 65 to 95, right? Without income, working income. So it's the wealth that you have saved, created in the first 30 years that's going to take care of you for the next 30 years. And it's a vicious cycle. I mean, we all go through that. Our parents go through that. We go through that. The difference is our grandfathers probably had 10 years of retirement before they passed away, and then our parents, they probably have another 20, 25 years, but we probably have 35, 40 years. So the lifespan keeps increasing, so the amount of money that you need in your water tank becomes even more important. So therefore, a lot of times we also need to sit down and think in terms of the wills and plans that we have to ensure that the money don't get squandered away for various reasons. So I'll share with you a very quick picture. You run your career or your business and the wealth that you have, and everything is fine because you're providing your family with the lifestyle that you have chosen for them, right? But if death, disability or critical illness occurs, then what really happens to your family? Everything starts to fall apart. So it's important for you to sit down and ask yourself, in the event of any of these three things happening, right, how is the entire financial picture for your family going to be impacted? So you want to make sure that you have a good retirement plan with a personal will, if there is a need, a trust plan, and a financial plan. So many a time, a lot of people sit down with your financial planner and get this part done very well. But very few people actually sit down and think in terms of, rather get this thing done very well, but they don't plan this, they don't plan this, and they don't plan this. And that's where all the problems starts to surface, because then the family will not have the proper support structures that are critical in terms of managing one's estate. So I want to cover with you on wills and trust today. And if you look at the demographics, you'll find that a lot more people are getting older, all right? And we are becoming top heavy. We're becoming top heavy. And a lot of younger people are there. So these people will move in the next 10, 15 years. This is going to move up. So like my daughter, she's married, and we talked to her about having a kid. She says, let's not have the discussion. So that's going to go for another 35. So she's about 29 years old. She says, let's talk about it when she's 35, right? So really today the family mode has changed. And my question to all of you is, how are you planning ahead over the next 20, 30 years? All right? And the increased likelihood of mental illness. So the moment you have an onset of a mental illness, doing up a will or doing up a trust doesn't become valid anymore, because you need to be attested by a lawyer or a doctor to show that you are of sane mind. All right? So I've clients of mine who didn't do a will, just kept pushing and pushing and pushing, and 10 days before passing on, they sit down and do up their will. Do you think clarity is there? Do you think thought process is there? Your decisions are made completely emotional, because you know that you don't know whether you're going to wake up tomorrow. Right? So I think it's important for all of us to sit down and ask ourselves, what do we want to do for our estate in the process? So estate planning is important because it's your last wishes in place. It's your last wishes. All right? Estate planning includes writing a will, setting up a trust, drawing up a lasting power of attorney, buying inheritance policies, nominating your CPF accounts. Because how do you ensure that your last wishes will be carried out? That's very important. And many a time we don't think about it, right? A lot of things are spoken throughout our conversations with our loved ones, but nothing is put down black and white, right? So they say from the cradle to the grave to the next generation. So you also need to understand that when you do a will, you also have to make sure that there's custody in terms of keeping the will. I know people who have gone through a divorce, done a will while they were married, and then they did another will, but it was not kept in custody. And when they pass away, trying to find that will becomes a big problem, because they live alone and you don't know where the will is. And the old will comes into the equation because they're not married, so the will doesn't become nullified. Because marriage will overthrow the old will, but if you're not married but you're divorced, that problem becomes a big problem. All right? So I always tell all my clients who get into a divorce, the first thing to do is to do a will and make sure it's in custody, because once you are divorced, you're the only one person there. And your kids may not know about your affairs because they don't want to know about your affairs. They just want to be well taken care of. So it becomes precarious when something happens. All right? So in the past, estate planning is not something like everyone talked about, right? But today, the misconception of people, estate planning is for the elderly and dying persons, which is not true. So that's why we are all sitting down trying to figure this thing out. So it's sometimes a topic that crops out when members share their own experience when they face difficulty in administering a diseased estate. So if you speak to Pata had a recent case where, someone passes away without a will. So you need to make sure that those estates are well taken care of, right? So we get this once, twice a year, 3 times a year, where we have to administer an estate with or without a will. All right. So we really go through this all the time. All right. So, so writing a will, right, is more than just a wills act. It involves all of these things. It involves will, estate, probate, trustee, inheritance, guardianship of infants if you have children below 21 years of age, Bankruptcy Act. I've had cases where $500,000 has gone to the official assignee because the person dies bankrupt. So the beneficiary is a bankrupt, and so the monies cannot go to the beneficiary. The insured is a bankrupt, so the monies cannot go to the beneficiaries. It automatically goes to the official assignee. So you can buy $10 million of insurance, you can buy $5 million of insurance, you can buy any amount of life insurance, but what is most important is how is that money going to be truncated to your loved ones, and how is it going to be kept in place. You got the Insurance Act, your CPF Act, all right? So if you don't have any nomination, so in CPF, just to cut the long story short, in CPF you have to make 2 nominations, all right? One nomination is your CPF account. The second one is your Dependent Protection Scheme, your DPS. So your DPS is a separate nomination, your CPF nomination is a separate nomination, your insurance nomination is a separate nomination. So these are the first cursory parts that you need to make sure that is done. All right? Unless you have chosen not to nominate, all right, then your wills come into the equation, but your CPF nomination cannot be willed out. It is a trust nomination, you have to indicate your nominee, if not it goes into your estate. The HDB Act. So the other thing is, if you live in a HDB and you have 2 children, both below 21 years of age, and God forbid something happens to both of you, husband and wife, the kids cannot own the property because they're below 21 years of age. The house has to be sold. What happens to the kids? Who's going to be the guardian? Yeah? If one of the partners is not a Singaporean, and only one is a Singapore PR or Singaporean, the spouse will not be able to own the property because they don't have legal rights to own a HDB flat. They will have to sell. All right? So the only way you can solve this problem is to go to HDB and ask for a waiver. And they'll give you a 1-year waiver, and next year you're going to go back again. And you don't know when the system will disallow you from extending the stay in the house. So a lot of people think that, oh, and I got a HDB flat, anything happens to me, it goes to my wife, fine, but if both passes on and the children are below 21, what really happens to the flat? Can they continue staying there? Who's going to be the legal guardian of the kids? Yeah? Then of course, if you're a Muslim, then of course, other things come into the equation. We won't discuss that now. And then of course you got Charities, Companies Act, Human Organ Transplant, Income Tax. You also have to pay your income tax. So income tax is something that is liable even though you passed on. So if you passed on in December and you earn an income from January to December, the following year your tax liabilities still have to be paid out of your estate. All right? And then of course you got your stamp duties and so on and so forth. All right? So it involves a lot of things. So which assets will be frozen when I pass away? So if you don't have a will and you don't have a good structure put in place, many of your assets will be frozen. So you need to ask yourself, how can you ensure that your assets are not frozen upon death? Okay? So in the interstate succession plan, this can be found on the internet, very easy. So if the spouse only no parents, no issue, the spouse gets the whole estate. The question here is, right, so no parents. So issue only, if no parents and no spouse, you go to the estate. Spouse and parents. So the most important thing in this whole thing is to remember that if you have children, all right, if you have children, your spouse and children will receive 50%, 50% of your estate. So if you do not want your children to have 50% of the estate, because the children will not have access to that money, and you want to make it 90% and 10%, then you have to do it either through a nomination or through your will to ensure that your spouse gets the full amount. And the other thing to consider is the moment you have a child, your mother and father will not receive any money from your estate if you did not put a will and indicate it in your will. Under interstate law, the monies will go to your wife and children or husband and child. It will not go to your parents. So you need to ask yourself, how do you want the money to flow? How do you want the estate to flow to each individual? All right? You may have a special nephew or niece that you want to give a certain amount of money to. If you don't have a will, that cannot be achieved. You can tell your wife or you can tell your spouse to say that, hey, I want this money to go blah, 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 blah. But once you pass on, a lot of other things come into the equation, right? And the reality is most singles are living alone. I share with you this is because we are all, husband and wives are not going to pass away together. One is going to leave the other alone. Who alone? We don't know. Is it going to be me? Is it going to be my wife? If it's my wife doesn't know how to manage finances. She has no clue. I give her a check every month. She uses it to pay. She only knows how to pay bills. You see the picture. She only knows how to pay the bills. She doesn't know how to manage the money. All right? And likewise, in a spouse, in a husband and wife situation, the wife may be able to manage all the assets and know how to do the investments. The husband doesn't know how to do anything at all. So how do you ensure that money lasts time? I think that's something that's very important to have, a discussion important to have. All right? So a lot of people are going to live longer and alone. And the good thing is, or the not so good thing is, women will live longer than men. So if the women pass away, men pass away fast. All right? And that's been proven. All right? But when the men pass away, the women start to rejoice and they live for another 10, 15 years. Okay? And that's life. Okay? I've seen that happen. My dad passed away when my mom was 40. He was 50 years old. Out of the blue, he just didn't come back home one night. All right? Heart attack. Eldest child 16 years old, youngest child 10 years old. Mom never worked before. At 40 years old, she had to handle the entire family. Yeah? And she's 85 years old today. 45 years, living all healthy. Now she's in US enjoying herself on a holiday. All right? So you need to ask yourselves, who's going to live longer? We don't know. Is it going to be me? Is it going to be my wife? I don't know. But if the money lands onto someone who doesn't know how to manage money, then you know you can have vultures coming around. Why didn't you do this investment? Why didn't you do that investment? And the entire estate will start getting depleted. Children will come in for money. People around will come in for money because they know money is there. That's the natural gravitation. When the moment the person passes away and millions of dollars passes onto someone's hands, trust me, people you have not seen a long time ago will start visiting you and giving condolences. And will keep coming back giving condolences. Right? And people who owe the family money will disappear, because my father was a businessman. There were a lot of people who owe him money. Suddenly nowhere to be found. Nowhere to be found. I remember one person who owed my dad a lot of money. Every month, you know what he did? He came to the house, and what did he do? Make a guess. He'll give my mom a big sweep ticket. Unfortunately, over 20 years, none of that big sweep tickets ever hit. Even the last price. But money was not paid. Yeah? So it's very important for you to manage these things. Having a property and making sure that your children don't sell the property for whatever reasons. Telling the mother that, maybe you can sell the house and move in, we'll buy another house, and then you stay with us. All right? And use the money to buy a new house so it's bigger and so more of us can stay with the grandchildren and blah, 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 blah. And next thing you know, after 3 years, the husband feels that, your mom's getting a little bit irrational here and there and not very comfortable. Why don't you just tell her to go, rent her own place? And the mother get kicked out. These are realities that if you don't do a will, these are all the issues that can crop up when you're no longer around. So I made it very clear that my 2 girls will not be able to ask my wife to sell the property at whatever reason, and she will stay in the property. We've even gone into the nursing area, where what will happen if we are sick, whether we want to stay in a house with the nursing care or not, everything has been stated very clearly. Why? Because these are the realities of life. That if we don't set in place, we'll be making guesses tomorrow. And we don't want to be making guesses. Yeah? So, claiming CPF nominees, no nomination, frustrating process. So it's very important to have your nominations for CPF. So, when you pass on with a will, you have a grant or probate which comes out within 2 months. If you don't have a will, you need a letter of administration, and a letter of administration can take as long as 6 months to come out. All right? And then that's how you basically get the executor to basically execute according to your will or not your will, depending the case be. All right? So I won't go through this. And this is something that's very important. So if you don't have a will, and your estate is more than $5 million with your real estate and all your insurance policies and your investments, if it's more than $5 million, you would then need to basically find a surety, 2 sureties. And they must be willing to stand for it, which means to say anything screws up here, they are liable financially. Anybody sues the estate because the monies have been distributed wrongly, they'll be sued. You tell me how many people will be willing to sign as sureties for the estate. I've had situations where it takes 6 months to a year to find a surety for the estate because people don't want to be implicated in any way or another. So when you have a will, you supersede the need for a surety. All right? So now the question of testamentary capacity to write a valid will. So these are all the things that you need to remember. So dying testate is very important. So this is something that's important. Write a will to live, love, care. A will is just a simple document, and we're no longer around. This is the only document that can represent and declare your wishes. Okay? I hope I'm good on time. Huh? When Pata comes in front of me, I don't know whether I burst my time already. No? So location of assets as well, because you live in Singapore, you may have assets in India and so on and so forth. So you always want to do a mirror will in Singapore and wherever you are. So if you've done a will here, you want to do exactly the same will there, because if not, you need to seal the will in the respective country. Sealing the will costs a lot of money. So I had a client of mine who had a will in India. They had to seal the will in Singapore, and you got to pay probate, you got to pay administrative costs and so on and so forth. It costs a lot more money than doing a will in Singapore itself. So just remember to do a will wherever you are, all right, to cover your assets both in 2 places that you have. If you have assets more than 2 places, then one has to be your primary will and the other becomes your secondary will. So your primary will take care of assets in Singapore and all your other assets around the world. Clear? And it can be used in India, for example. But if you don't want, you use an India will to take care of that. So all other remnants assets that you have outside India will fall under your Singapore context, because Singapore is a lot more efficient and transparent in the process of distribution of the assets. You don't have to go through long waiting periods like in other countries. All right, in Singapore and India are both in the Commonwealth, so they all follow the same kind of law that is used in terms of distribution. Clear? So you can have a single or multiple wills. Revocation of wills, marriage obviously revokes a will. So if you don't do a will, then people can be siphoning off money. A few years ago, 3 years ago, there was a lady who received $1 million from the death of her husband. All right, and she was a cleaner at the airport. Within 3 years, that $1 million became to zero and she was a pauper. You know why? People came to her with beautiful investment ideas and strategies, and the money just got stifled out. So it's not just doing will to say I want to distribute the assets, and that's why a trust comes into the equation. The trust helps to hold the money to ensure that a lot of things are taken care of. So you have, a family with young children, you have the mother's family, you got the father's, and then you got a foster family, and so many other things come into the equation. So you need to sit down with a will expert or a trust expert to basically sit down and go through this so that you can accomplish your wishes. All right, so guardian is something that's very important, especially for young children. So my old will is no longer there because our kids are over 21 years old already. So the guardianship is no longer important. With your kids who are below 21, then this is something that's important to do. All right, so this is when you have both a will and a trust. So I come to the area of a trust now. Trust doesn't have to be a complicated matter. A lot of people think that a trust is a complicated matter. It is not a complicated matter. You can put it part of a will, or you can do a standalone trust. So I'll put it to you. So when I pass away, I want my spouse to receive 200,000 immediately from the bank account to give liquidity. And then I want my daughter to receive from my $500,000 insurance policy, 40K every year, starting from the age of 25 for 10 years, and the remaining is one lump sum on the 11th year. She must not be a bankrupt, and she must not be married. Clear? So you can indicate whatever reason you want to. All right? The reason for this is because once you get married and then you get divorced, the money becomes matrimonial assets. So some people may say, I don't want my assets to become part of a matrimonial asset. All right? And you can retain control or the benefits of your daughter under the trust. So if you have money under a trust, you can then decide how the money to be passed on to your children at any given point of time. Because when you have kids and you have a spouse, there are a couple of things that come into the equation. Number one, how are they going to manage the money? Very simple. As long as you decide how are they going to manage the money. So like in my case, when I pass on, my wife's very clear. She wants it in fixed deposit. Not even in equity markets. She says, money in the bank account is better than putting it in the markets. I think differently. But you know what's important when I'm not around? Her peace of mind. It's now how much my money is growing. So you've got to be clear about what your decisions are made at different times. Whether that chunk of money dwindles faster because it's not growing, it doesn't matter. I just have to provide more to make sure that she has the peace of mind. And my kids, whether you give them $1 million or you give them $10 million doesn't make a difference, because if they're good and they're smart, they'll make their own money. I don't need to leave money for them. Whatever comes to them is a bonus, is incidental. So I put it into a trust so that the monies will not go to my children, because I do not want the risk of matrimonial divorce tomorrow. Anything can happen. 5 in 10 get divorced today. So we don't know what's going to happen, right? So I want to make sure that money is protected. My wife may decide to have another guy tomorrow after I'm dead. And that guy can come into the estate. She passes on. The money also goes into the trust. All her assets will go into the trust. Why? Because I do not want another woman to come to me and start to pillow talk me and unwind this money. Because I don't know the kind of person I'm going to be without my wife. A lot of things can happen. We always think that things will not happen. But I've seen enough cases where things happen. All right? So it's very important for us to sit down and ask ourselves, these are some fundamental things. The other thing is, if our kids are into investments, my younger daughter is in mergers and acquisition. If for some reason she gets into some investment scheme and she becomes a bankrupt, and I pass on, because when someone's going through a difficult period, they're not going to sit down and talk to me about it. But if I pass away and she's made a bankrupt, whatever I leave behind for my daughters in my will will be wiped out immediately. And that's why having a trust in your will, what we call by a testamentary trust, or creating a standby trust separate from your will, is very critical. And you don't have to sit down and think too many things into the equation, because it's a very simple concept. The whole idea is to put all your assets into a cup. You're just putting all your assets into the cup. And then you have your letter of wishes. They really clearly states. It doesn't cost you anything at all. It costs you like $5,000, $6,000 to create a trust. Right? And the trustees can be a private limited company, so that it is not an individual. Monies go into this trust. This monies will not go to the beneficiaries immediately upon death. It will go to the beneficiaries according to the wishes of the trust. And you can indicate. And the good thing about a trust is that every year you can rewrite your letter of wishes. You can say, I want to change my letters of wishes. So every year in December, you sit down, reevaluate the situation, and just change the letter of wishes. The trust still continues. In a will, you need to rewrite your will altogether again and decide how you want to distribute. So all you need to do in a trust is to create the trust. All the monies go in upon death. So what we call by a standby trust. All the money goes into the trust. And your letter of wishes can change from time to time. and that gets protected. So you do your will for your remnants of your estate. So whatever that doesn't go into your trust will be distributed according to your will as your remnants. Pata, how am I good on time? All right, 5 minutes. So these are all the assets that you probably own, and digital assets I like to add in because these are things that are hidden. So if any of you who have, be it husband or wife, who has $10 million of Bitcoins in your account where you don't want to tell your spouse, you've got to find a way to let them know because it's going to be lost upon death. And no one's going to benefit from it. So if you have monies in Bitcoin, give them the account. Or put it in a place, put it in a safe box and say this can be opened and all the details are inside there. If not, your Bitcoins will be lost upon death. Clear? And any other assets that you have kept away from your spouse. You know, some of you are smiling, but it is a fact. All right? So we all need to ask ourselves, are there assets that my spouse doesn't know? So my wife has all the passwords, all the information that she can just go in and clear everything. All right? So I've even made it simpler. My son-in-law will be the one who will go into my account and sell off all my US shares upon my death because I do not want any tax implications. Very simple. So upon my death, the immediate thing is no emotions involved, go into my account, close everything. All positions, beat the market situation, don't care, close everything. So there won't be any estate liability from the US. Clear? So these are things that you need to sit down and think about because these things are not going to be managed by your will and your trust because if you don't have that, then you need to basically provide for a US trust and so on and so forth. And if you're a Singaporean or Singapore PR and you don't have, apart from your shares as assets of the US, this is something that you just can do. All right? So it's immediate. All right? And then, of course, you have your insurance, your CPF nominees, and your joint ownership. The other thing is your property. Is it on joint tenancy or joint tenancy in common? So once you've got that done right, that's fine. Okay? So if you have properties that are owned by one person alone, so this is something that's very important. If it's joint tenancy, it's fine because the other person will receive the monies. All right? And of course, if both of you pass on together in an air crash, then you want to make sure that your will then take over the decisions of the property, whether it's going to be part of the trust or not. All right, so that's basically it. Yeah, so to summarize, a will has to have 4 important functions: guardianship, name of executor, name of beneficiaries, and create a trust. Very simple. I always say that even in your will, you need to create a trust, what we call by testamentary trust. If you have a little bit more money and you have a little bit more concerns, maybe you have a special kid or something like that, then you want to create a standby trust, which will cost you about a total of about $6,000-7,000, but it really gives you peace of mind for the people around so that you don't have vultures coming in and taking the money unnecessarily because your wishes are very clearly identified. Of course, limitations is CPF, joint assets, all right? And based on the situation, you have your insurance policies, your own assets, your trust property, and your shares in private companies. So if you have, like for example, you have JP Morgan shares, or you've got Standard Chartered shares, or you've got some shares that is there, you also need to make sure that the tax implications are also well managed from there. And so just remember this: if you don't have a will, all right, the interstate lot comes in. So the other thing is the LPA. LPA is very simple today. You can go online and get this thing done. All right, so that if you lose your mental capacity, if you lose your mental capacity, the other person will be able to manage your estate. All right. So in terms of legacy planning, because we all have our wills and our trusts, but you also need to feed assets. I share with you one thing that I share with all my clients. Only way an individual can win or take advantage of an insurance company is upon death. There is no other debt instrument or investment instrument better than a legacy plan. Because you put in $150,000, you're covered for $1 million. It takes you donkey years for you to get $1 million with $150,000. Even at 8%, it takes you, even if you take the double, it takes you at least about 30-40 years to get there. So if you do a legacy plan, you solve that problem by creating enough money because you may have other assets inside there that may not be distributed equally. So you want an equalization plan. So if you have $3 million in cash, instead of just giving $500,000 upon death to your loved ones and spending 2.5 million, you can actually still have the $3 million cash, use the 150 to purchase a life insurance for $3 million and still spend $2.5 million. Your children will receive $3 million, you'd have spent 2.5. If you didn't have a structured process put in place, your family would have been compromised of $2.5 million of assets. Very simple, because insurance companies always lose money when someone passes on. They only make money when you surrender a policy. They only make money when they surrender a policy or when the policy matures. All right? But they always invariably lose money upon death. And only the ones who have the ability to put money aside can take advantage and win the insurance company from an actuarial perspective. I'm giving you back-end information. All our losses are from death payouts, not from maturity benefits and not from surrenders. All right? So we use all the big names, from your Bailey Gifford to your Wellington Management to your Capital Group and to your BlackRock. These are all our global fund managers who basically manage all our funds. And of course, you can choose your risk profile, balanced, conservative, or adventurous. And of course, there's all a structure put in place, and AI itself manages, close to 300 billion. Today is $300 billion of assets under management. They use the same management and investment philosophies for the clients as well. So none other person to speak to is basically Partha, to understand how this whole thing can actually web together in terms of planning for your will, your trust, and your family, and more importantly, your retirement, because we're all going to live longer, and hope that you and your spouse live a good 30 years of retirement together, spending all the money that you have. Don't have to live so much for your children, don't worry. If you want to live more, do your legacy plans, because the legacy plans basically do that part. So I've done a lot of that, so that when I pass on, I can spend everything that I have, and I know my kids will have millions of dollars set aside for them to give them a head start. But the monies will not go to them until they are 50. So I share with you the logic, because most people at 50 have their parents still around, either one of them. So the monies will still be with my wife or me when they turn 50, because one of us will be around, in all likelihood. All right? There are some rare cases where both father and mother is not around when they hit 50. So ask yourself, when you're 50, was one of your parents around? Anybody at 50 didn't have your parents around at all. You see? So very simple. So all the monies will go to my children only after they are 50, because they are more responsible with their assets. And I believe that I don't want to give a free lunch. I want to make sure that they get their money at a later point and they can pass it on to the next generation again while they earn their money. But there's always a good backup and a safety net for them. And that's why the trust is in place. And the trust very clearly puts in place that the monies can be received by my beneficiaries at any given point in time if they have a financial situation of worthy reason. And the monies can come out to help them. Everything has been put in place to protect that. All right? That's all. Thank you very much. Partha, all yours.